skeletal, muscular, and nervous systems are. We're going to start with the skeletal system. The skeletal system is the bodily system that consists of bones, the connective tissue, and the joints. The human skeletal system is made up of 206 bones. We're going to start with what the functions of the skeletal system is. The skeletal system gives us a framework and structure, which is what gives us our shape. And it also gives us protection. Here we have the example of the ribs, which protect the internal organs. And for example, some of the internal organs are the heart and the lungs. The skeletal system is what allows us to move, which is one of its functions. And also it's where we store some minerals, for example, calcium and vitamin D. And also this is where we produce our blood cells, and it gives us support. One part of the skeletal system is the bone marrow, which is pretty much the insides of a bone. The bone marrow runs through the center of the bone. For example, here in the femur, it will be running like a canal in the inside of the bone. We have two types of bone marrow, which is one of them is the red bone marrow, and it's the one that produces the blood cells, which allows us to transport oxygen and nutrients all throughout the body. And it also produces certain types of white blood cells, which are the ones who help us fight diseases when we're sick. And the second type of bone marrow is the yellow bone marrow, which is composed of mostly fat cells, and this is where we store most of the energy. Here we have the example of the femoral head to see what the bone marrow looks like. The femoral head is this ball right here, which is circled in yellow, and this is where the femur and the hip bone connect. Right here we see the outer surface of the bone, and then on the inside we see what the red marrow looks like, and it's right here where the arrow is pointing. And also we have the yellow marrow, which is this right here, which looks more like orange yellowish, and it's more at the center of the canal. We're gonna visit what the type of bones are. We have 4 types of bones in the human body. The first one we're gonna see are the long bones. The long bones are the bones that we find on the arms. For example, the humerus, the ulna, and the radius here. And also the bones on your legs. They're circled in yellow right now. And also we have short bones, which will be the ones that we can find on your toes and your fingers. Another type of bones is the flat bones, and we can find them on the pelvis and the skull. Finally, we have irregular bones. And irregular bones, some examples will be the backbone bones and also the ear bones. They're really tiny, the ear bones, and they're irregular in shape. They don't have a specific shape. Now we turn to the joints and connective tissue. To start with, I'm going to give you the definition of a joint, which is a place where 2 or more bones meet. Some of the connective tissue that we have are tendons, which connect the bone to a muscle, and ligaments, which connect a bone to bone. And finally, we have a cartilage, which is flexible but really tough, elastic connective tissue that covers the bones at a joint. The cartilage is what prevents bones from rubbing with each other when we move. Here we have the example of what the knee joint looks like, and we're gonna see all these structures, just to see more or less what they look like in the knee joint. We're gonna start with the muscles. Right here, these fibrous tissue that you see right here are muscles. These will be the muscles on your thighs, on the front of your thighs. And then here we have the 4 bones that compose the knee joint, which are right here the patella. And then back here we have the femur, which will run all the way up, right? And then we have the tibia, which are like your chin bones. And then the fibula, it's what allows your foot to move from side to side. And then we have the tendon right here. This is one of the tendons, but it's the one that we see here in this picture. You can see right here it's connecting one of the tight muscles to the patella right here, and it's connecting a muscle to a bone. Over here too we have another tight muscle, and it's connecting the muscle on your thigh to your femur. Next we have the ligaments. Right here you can see 1, 2, 3 on the back, and 4. As you can see, the ligaments are connecting bone to bone. Right here we can see this ligament is connecting the femur to the fibula. And right here these 2 are connecting the tibia to your femur. And lastly, over here we have the femur and the tibia connected. And lastly, we can see here what the cartilage looks like. You can see it's covering the femur right here from rubbing with the tibia. The tibia also has cartilage, but it's not really shown in this picture. Now we're going to turn to the type of joints. We have 5 type of joints in the human body. One of them is the ball and socket joint. The ball and socket joint allows movement in almost all directions. Some examples would be the hip joint and the shoulder. If, for example, you take your arm and you rotate it in circles, you can tell how much movement the ball and socket joint allows. Next we have the hinge joints, which only allow movement in one direction. An example of this would be the knees and the elbows. If you can move your forearm up and down, you can tell that it's only in one movement, which is up or down. You can also move it like to the side a little, but it's not much movement, so it's considered one movement in one direction. We also have the gliding joints, which allow movement, but it's really limited in how many directions you can do it. And this will be the movement that we find in the ankles and on the wrists. Also we have the pivot joint, which allows us to move from side to side. For example, the vertebrae, they allow us to move from side to side. For example, when you turn to see back or something, your vertebrae are rotating to a side, and the pivot joint is what allows it to happen. We also have another type of joint, which is the fixed joints, and they don't allow any type of movement. They just connect the 2 bones together. And here we have the example of the skull. In here we can see what the fixed joints look like. They're separated so we can see them more clearly, but usually it's like if you see it, it's just a line. But it's another type of joint. Right here we're comparing what the human arm and its structure, its bone structure, to the bone structure of some other species. For example, here we have a cat, a whale, and a bat. And we can see the structures are really similar, and they also have similar functions. Right here we see the humerus, and we see a similar structure that a cat and a whale and a bat have. And also we see the ulna and the radius. They also have some bones that will be in function more or less like the human radius and ulna. Now we're gonna see what the muscular system is. The muscular system is interrelated with the skeletal system to allow movement. So they work together, and in conjunction they allow us to move. The muscles are tissues that contract, and they are made of fibers which shorten, and that's a contraction. And that's how they move the bones, and that's how we move. We have two types of muscles. We have the voluntary muscles and the involuntary muscles. So we're going to see what first the voluntary muscles. The voluntary muscles are muscles that you can consciously control. So pretty much if you think about, oh, I'm going to move my arm, you move it. And if someone says, oh, move your arm, and you don't want to move it, you won't move it, right? So you can control that. These types of muscles are called the skeletal muscles, and they are used to control your bone movement. We have the tendons are the strong fibrous connective tissue that connect a muscle to a bone. And the voluntary muscles usually work as opposing muscles, which means that while one of the muscles is contracting, the opposing muscle relaxes. For example, here we have the example of the bicep and tricep, but also the quadriceps and the hamstrings, which are the muscles on your thighs. They also work as opposing muscles, but here we have the example of the biceps and the triceps. Here, so when you move your forearm up, the bicep is contracting, and while the bicep is contracting, the tricep is relaxing. So that allows you to move your forearm up. And then on the other side, when your tricep is contracting, your bicep is relaxing. So that allows you to move your forearm down. The next type of muscles is the involuntary muscles, and these are muscles that work with your these are muscles that work without your without you controlling them. For example, we have the heart and the lungs. I mean, you don't have to think, oh, I'm gonna breathe right now. Like you already breathe, like you breathe even when you're asleep, when you're like really excited, when you're up, when you're running. You don't have to think, oh, I have to breathe. No, like you can obviously like do it, but you don't have to be thinking about it 24/7 that you have to breathe. It's the same with your heart. You don't have to be thinking, oh, I have to pump blood all over my body, so I'm gonna make my heart beat. No, it just happens. You're not thinking about it, but it's happening. These types of muscles are called the smooth muscles, and they move material into, through, and out of the body. For example, when you eat something, food doesn't just get to your stomach by magic. Like your muscles and your esophagus and your stomach and everything are moving the food that you just ate through your body. And that's how it gets all the way from your mouth to your stomach to the intestines. Some other examples of smooth muscles would be, like we mentioned, the lungs and the intestines, and also your bladder and your blood vessels. Next we have the nervous system. The nervous system is the bodily system that coordinates its voluntary and involuntary actions and transmits signals between different parts of the body. These signals can be either electrical or chemical. The nervous system is composed of the brain, which is obviously right here at the top, the spinal cord, which runs all the way from the base of your brain to the sacrum, and the neurons, which are specialized cells that receive and transmit signals. Okay, so here we have a picture of what a neuron looks like. One neuron is right here. It starts in the orange and then goes to the blue. This will be another neuron, and this will be another neuron. So there's three main parts to a neuron. First we have the dendrites, which are these branch-like structures that we see right here in orange. The dendrites are what receive messages from other neurons. Next we have the cell body, which is right here in the center, and this purple circle is what will be the nucleus of the neuron. And then we have the axon. The axon is where the electrical signal travels, and the axon will be this part of the neuron in red. The axon is it's surrounded by a main sheet, and the reason why it's surrounded by it is that it insulates and improves the speed of the impulses to be conducted. And right here, this circle area is a synapse, and it's the gap between neurons. Like, they don't touch each other, but they're really close. And this is where the electrical message is changed to a chemical message. Okay, so a message, it can go from the brain to whatever extremity, for example an arm, or it can go from an arm, for example, to the brain. So for example, if we have a message starting right here, right? So here will be what the cell body will be, and then the axon, and then right here is where the message is going to be transmitted, and then this cell is going to get the message, and it's going to travel through the axon, and then it's going to go to the tips of the axon, and it's going to convert from an electrical message to a chemical message, and then the other neuron is going to get it on its dendrites, and then it's going to process it, and then it travels again through the axon, and then it goes through the tips of the axon, and that's how a message travels from that one neuron to the other, all the way till it reaches the brain. Next we have the spinal cord. The spinal cord right here, it's this line that you see in the back of this model. And it consists of nerve fibers that send impulses to and from the brain to the rest of the body. So pretty much it's in between the neurons and the brain. So the spinal cord is what sends the messages from the brain to from the body to the brain, and it's what allow us to function. It also has a defense mechanism or system which allow us to immediately act on an emergency without involving the brain. So for example, if you touch a hot stove and the neurons in your hand are gonna send a message really quickly, and it's gonna reach the spinal cord. But since it's something that can cause the body an injury, right away without contacting the brain, it's gonna send a message back, and it's gonna be like, take your hand off the stove, because you're gonna hurt yourself, you're gonna get burned or something. So it's like a reflex mechanism, and what it does is that it gives us a faster response to prevent an injury. Let's say maybe this time it could have been that you just felt it being warm or being really hot, but if it had to go all the way to the brain and get processed and then go all the way back as a message to your hand, you would have had like a burn, like a worse injury. Right here, now we have the brain, which contains 90% of our neurons, and it's what controls all actions except reflexes. Remember, reflexes are controlled by your spinal cord. And then different parts of our brain are what control our different parts of our body. Now we're going to see what the structure of the brain looks like. First, we're going to see what the base looks like. This right here will be the base of the brain. So we have the cerebellum, which is right here in red. The cerebellum helps us with coordination, posture, and balance. The medulla oblongata, it's what controls our involuntary body functions, and it's right here in green. And then we have what it's pons. The pons is what control the rate of breathing and relay signals between the cerebellum and the cerebrum. Like we said, the cerebellum is right here in red. This is the pons, and this is what connects the cerebellum to the cerebrum, right here. So the cerebrum is the large structure at the top of the brain, right here. This big structure is the cerebrum, and the cerebellum is the small part right here in red. Okay, so the cerebrum is what helps us with motor coordination and interpretation of sensory information inside and outside the body. For example, if we touch a teddy bear, for example, and the neurons on our hands are gonna send the message to the brain, and this part of the brain, which will be the brain cortex, is gonna allow us to know that it feels soft. And also we have hemispheres. Hemi, it's a half. Hemispheres, we have two sides of the brain, and this will be one half, for example, and then on the other side, which it's hard to see in this picture, will be the other half of the brain. And in each half we have 4 lobes, which will be like 1, 2, 3, 4. So the lobes. The lobes are like sections of the brain, and here we're gonna discuss them. Okay, so the first part of the brain is the frontal lobe, which is right here in purple. The frontal lobe will be more or less on your forehead, and it regulates voluntary movements, and it's also involved in decision making and problem solving. Next we have what the temporal bone, lobe. Here we see it in blue. And it regulates memory, emotion, hearing, and language. And this is more or less where your ear is. Next we have the parietal lobe, which is right here on top on green. And it processes sensory signals from the body. And lastly we have the occipital bone lobe right here in blue, like royal blue, and will be on the back of your head. And it is what it's involved in sight and visual memory. And that's it. Thank you for watching.